Audrey. Cow. Nothing new beneath the sun. You've seen it all, or so you say, but then a special moment comes that blithely takes your breath away. The inspiration for that poem. I think Norma is the one you should probably ask. Norma. Cow. Oh, for heaven's sakes, must we talk about it? I'd rather not. If I did what I did, and if I knew I'd be scrutinized about it later, I'd quite certainly not have done it. Well, maybe not. Audrey. Cow. How is it that horrible things happen on a beautiful sunny day? Wouldn't it be more appropriate, if you're going to be miserable or frightened, that it can be on a terrible day, a gloomy, gray, wet, and cold day? That would then allow the good days to remain untainted, so they can be enjoyed to their full potential. The day of my escape was probably one of the nicest days that we'd had on Bittersweet Farm that year. The sky was completely clear, but for one single cloud. And the breeze, being so weak, the cloud stayed in place, as if it were pinned there. Mother and I used to interpret cloud shapes when I was little. My imagination was feeble compared to hers, but Mother would always spin my ideas into colorful stories. Audrey, she'd say, look at that small fluffy one. What does it remind you of? I could have said a half-dozen interesting things. I could have said it looked like Middle Boy Lester's toy sailboat that he floats on Artificial Lake, or the humongous mustache on Old Man Farmer who comes visiting from Skyview Farms. But instead, I'd proclaim the most boring and obvious. It looks like a sheep. Mother would take it in stride. Well, yes, Audrey, it is a sheep. That's what happens sometimes to sheep if they get too happy. The happiness fills them up like a balloon and makes them lighter than air. The next thing you know, the sheep is lifting off the ground and floating away. Farmer must always take the precaution of tying a string around a happy sheep's leg so that if it starts to rise, he can grab that string and attach it to a fence post. Some days there are so many sheep up in the air that you'd think Farmer was celebrating a birthday. I would have taken her tales as true facts if I hadn't learned to spot the twinkle in Mother's eye. Then we'd share the joke, although I couldn't look at a sheep the same way for quite some time afterward. By the time of my escape, my imagination had improved, but today it was colored by fear. What I saw in that single cloud against the powder blue sky reminded me of an angry wolf with its mouth wide open and sharp teeth ready to snap. Hardly what you call a good omen. Eddie. Dog. None of us met that final morning. See, we figured it might raise suspicion. We all went about our business like it was a regular day. Only when Roy gave the signal would we put the plan into action. Roy. Horse. High noon was where we were to get the show started. I stood in a clearing beyond the orchard, watching my long shadow get smaller and smaller as the morning progressed and the sun rose higher. When finally there was nothing more than a pony attached to my hooves, I moseyed over to the entrance gate, all casual-like, pretending to graze, but really there to anticipate the truck's arrival. By golly, it was not long before I heard the grunt and growl of its engine. Then it reared its ugly scarlet head as it climbed up the steep grade about 100 yards yonder. I turned and made the rounds of notification, first past Audrey in the cowshed, then Buster, then finally the sheep and young Eddie. Casey. Human. Okay, I'll tell you what I saw. But jumping June bugs, I've been getting nothing but grief for this since it happened. I'm an independent businessman, hard-working, don't you know, and my reputation is everything. I'd had the delivery contract for the Daisy Dream Avatar for nearly a decade. I'd covered all the farms in the Maple Valley, all of them, and there's a lot. My Red Bessie isn't just the biggest truck by any stretch, but she isn't new or fancy by an even longer stretch. But she's well maintained and she has been reliable, just as I have been too. I pulled into Bittersweet Farm at noon as scheduled. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. Everything A-OK. I just had one pickup, a Charlet. Now, they are one of your bigger cows, so I deliberately didn't book any pickups for the afternoon. I can fit 2 regular-sized cows in the carriage comfortably, but if it's a tight fit, it can stress them out. And the Daisy Dream Abattoir owners want a calm cow upon arrival. I can tell you now, though, that once I saw this particular Charlet, I realized that I could probably have fit another one on the truck without any problem, and made myself a little extra coin, don't you know? Then again, I might have ended up with 2 embarrassments instead of 1, so I'll just count my blessings. Buster. Pig. The truck pulled into the farm and, yes, it turned so that the back was facing the cowshed. Farmer was alone that day. He came over to greet the driver. I saw them shake hands, yes, and then the driver swung open the truck's back gate. It made a terrible squeal. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, I don't like that sound. I hide when I hear it, but, no, not this time. I stood tall. Yes, I did. I told Eddie to signal the sheep to get ready to move. Eddie. Dog. Farmer and driver were heading toward the cowshed, so I ran over to the sheep as soon as Farmer's back was turned. Something didn't feel right. There was a lot of chatter among the sheep, a lot of grumbling mainly, but jeepers, I had no time to ask. I told Clark to get everyone to move into position beside the cowshed door as soon as possible, and then I rushed back to Buster's pen, where we had hidden the screw mounted in wood. I grabbed it in my mouth and headed over to the truck. I was supposed to stand it upright, just in front of the tire of the passenger side of the cab. The driver wouldn't likely pay attention to that corner of the vehicle before he drove off. The screw point had to be positioned under one of the grooves in the tire so it could go in deep. Buster knew that the back axle had 2 tires on each side, so flattening one wouldn't draw much attention. The front axle has just a single tire on each side, which means the driver would be forced to stop to fix a flat. But after I set the screw in place and backed up from under the cab, there was Dad waiting for me, and not looking happy. No siree. Audrey. Cow. Being stuck in the cowshed, I knew nothing of what was happening near the truck. I heard Farmer and the driver, though. I heard the scrape of boot soles along the gravel and their conversation getting louder as they approached the spot where I awaited my fate. I was put off by their dull subject matter. Talk about gas prices rising again and grain prices falling and whether they'll finally put a traffic light at some intersection. Here I was, about to be taken to Abbott's War, in theory, anyway. The least they could do would be to talk about the beautiful weather we were having or the musicality of the word amaryllis. Talk about something meaningful or say nothing at all and allow my departure to be handled solemnly. In any case, I quickly stuck Buster's twisty thingamajig in my mouth, thus making me the solemn one. Hiding that metal piece rendered me as silent as a centipede that accidentally walked into a rooster meeting. Clark. Sheep. Ahem. Most everyone is acquainted with our group loitering technique, I assume. Briefly, that is when we stand around in a tight bunch, remaining stationary and dense for as long as possible. There's little call for it here on Bittersweet Farm, but it plays well if sheep are being herded along a road and a car comes by. We gather in the middle of the road, blocking traffic and showing what can be achieved by our collective will. Drivers will not test our resolve, and it isn't until the sheepdog is set upon us that we are forced to disperse. However, there is another tactic we can use in nonviolent protest. We call it the white tornado, although it has been referred to as the sheep cyclone by some. It is a highly advanced move that requires speed, agility, and above all, cooperation. It's extremely difficult to do and nearly impossible to stop, so is used very sparingly. Once we agreed to get involved, we all voted, after long debate mind you, to use the white tornado as our method of distraction in the Audrey rescue plan, which we codenamed Operation Urgent Fury, or OUF.